My wife abandoned me with our 5 children. 12 years later, she's shocked by what I did with them. The rain fell relentlessly that Sunday afternoon, as if the sky shared the pain that was about to befall the Thompson family. Jack, 33, father of 5, watched through the foggy window, unaware that this would be the day that would change his life forever. The creak of the front door made Jack turn around. Sarah, his wife of 15 years, entered soaking wet, her eyes red and swollen. Something was wrong, very wrong. "Sarah, what happened?" Jack asked, his heart racing. She didn't answer. Instead, she went upstairs towards the couple's bedroom, leaving a trail of water behind. Jack followed her, worry growing with each step. In the bedroom, Sarah opened the wardrobe and began throwing clothes into a suitcase. Her movements were frantic, almost desperate. "Sarah, for God's sake, talk to me," Jack pleaded, holding her by the shoulders. She shrugged him off, her eyes avoiding his. "I can't do this anymore, Jack. I just can't." "Can't do what? What are you talking about?" At that moment, a baby's cry echoed through the house. Emily, the youngest at just 3 months old, had woken up. Sarah flinched at the sound, as if she had received an electric shock. "I'm not cut out for this. I wasn't born to be a mother," she muttered, the words coming out between sobs. Jack was paralyzed, unable to process what he was hearing. "Sarah, you're tired. It's just a phase. We can talk. I can help more. We can—" "No!" Sarah shouted, interrupting him. "You don't understand. I'm suffocating. Every cry, every scream, every "oh, mommy," is like a knife in my chest. I can't take it anymore." She violently closed the suitcase and headed for the door. Jack, coming out of his stupor, ran to block her. "And the kids, you can't just leave." Sarah looked at him, and for the first time since she arrived, her eyes met Jack's. What he saw there frightened him more than any word. A void, an absence of connection he had never noticed before. "They have you, Jack. You've always been the perfect father. I'm dispensable." With a quick movement, she pushed him and went down the stairs. Jack followed her, shouting her name, begging her to stop, to think about the children. In the living room, Ethan, the oldest at 12, was standing, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Mom? Dad? What's going on?" Sarah hesitated for a moment upon seeing her son, but soon resumed her path to the door. Jack tried to reach her, but tripped on the living room rug. "Sarah, please," he shouted one last time. She stopped with her hand on the doorknob, turned slightly and said, "Forgive me, Jack. One day you'll understand." And with that, she went out into the pouring rain, leaving behind a stunned husband, a son in shock, and 4 children who still didn't know that their lives had just changed forever. Jack slowly got up, his legs shaking. Ethan ran to the window, shouting for his mother, while Emily's cry intensified upstairs. At that moment, watching his oldest son sob against the window, hearing the desperate cry of the baby, and knowing that somewhere in the house the twins and Noah were sleeping oblivious to the tragedy that had just befallen them, Jack felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. How would he explain this to the children? How would he raise 5 children alone? And, more importantly, why had Sarah abandoned them like this? Going up the stairs to calm Emily, Jack had no idea that this was just the beginning of a journey that would test every fiber of his being. He didn't know that, 12 years later, Sarah's return would bring to light long-buried secrets and put to the test everything he had built. On that rainy night, as he cradled his youngest daughter, Jack made a silent promise. He would do whatever it took to keep his family united and happy, no matter the cost. Little did he know that the real challenge was yet to come, and that the choices he would make in the coming years would shape not only his family's destiny, but reveal truths about himself that he never imagined existed. The sun had barely risen when Jack woke up startled, his body aching after another night on the living room couch. For a brief moment, he forgot the events of the previous day, but reality hit him like a punch to the stomach. Sarah had left. Emily's cry echoed through the house, as if it were the official alarm clock of the Thompson family's new reality. Jack got up, rubbing his swollen eyes from crying so much, and went up the stairs towards the baby's room. "James, I'm coming, princess," he muttered, picking Emily up. The smell of sour milk and dirty diaper enveloped him, reminding him that he had no idea when the baby had last been changed. As he clumsily changed Emily, Jack heard footsteps in the hallway. Ethan appeared at the door, his eyes red and his hair disheveled. "Dad," he said, his voice choked. "Mom, she's coming back, isn't she?" Jack's heart tightened. How to explain something he didn't even understand himself? "Ethan, I don't know, son. But what I do know is that we're going to be okay, all right? I promise." Ethan nodded, not looking very convinced, and turned to leave. "Hey, champ," Jack called him. "Can you help me wake up your sisters and prepare breakfast? We have a busy day ahead." In the minutes that followed, the Thompson house came to life. The twins, Olivia and Sophia, 9 years old, came down the stairs hand in hand, their eyes wide with confusion. Noah, 6 years old, still sleepy, repeatedly asked where Mommy was. In the kitchen, chaos reigned. Jack tried to prepare bottles, toast and eggs simultaneously, while answering a whirlwind of questions from the children. "Dad, who's going to take me to school?" Sophia asked, poking at a burnt piece of toast. "I will, sweetheart," Jack replied, trying not to burn the eggs. "But what about your work?" Olivia questioned, frowning. Jack froze. Work? How was he going to balance his job at the construction company with 5 children to care for? "Don't worry about that now," he said, forcing a smile. "Let's focus on starting the day well, okay?" After a chaotic breakfast and a rush to pack backpacks and find lost shoes, Jack managed to take everyone to school. Back home, he allowed himself a moment of despair, tears finally falling freely. The sound of the doorbell pulled him from his gloomy thoughts. When he opened the door, he found Mrs. Wilson, the 70-year-old neighbor who lived next door. "Good morning, Jack," she said, her wrinkled face full of concern. I saw Sarah leaving yesterday. Is everything all right?" Jack hesitated for a moment before breaking down, telling Mrs. Wilson everything between sobs. The lady listened patiently, her eyes filling with compassion. "Oh, my dear," she said, pulling Jack into a maternal hug. "You're not alone in this. I'll help you in any way I can." In the weeks that followed, Mrs. Wilson became a guardian angel for the Thompson family. She helped with the children, taught Jack to cook simple dishes, and offered precious advice on child rearing. A month after Sarah's departure, Jack was sitting on the porch, watching the children play in the backyard. Emily was sleeping in his arms, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a moment of peace. "So you know, Jack," Mrs. Wilson said, sitting down next to him, "you're doing much better than you think." Jack laughed humorlessly. "I don't even know if I'm doing the right thing, Mrs. Wilson. Sometimes I feel like I'm just pretending." "We all are, dear," she replied with a wise smile. "The secret is to keep trying, day after day." At that moment, Ethan approached, holding a drawing. "Look, Dad, I made this for you," he said, handing over the paper. Jack looked at the drawing. 6 stick figures, 1 big and 5 small, all holding hands. Above, in colorful letters, was written, "My family." With tears in his eyes, Jack hugged his son. "It's beautiful, Ethan. Let's put it on the fridge." As he walked into the house, Jack felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, they would get through this together. What Jack didn't know was that this was just the beginning of a journey that would test his strength, his love, and his determination in ways he could never have imagined. And that, 12 years later, when he thought he finally had all the answers, Sarah's return would turn his world upside down once again. 6 months had passed since Sarah left, and life in the Thompson house had found a new rhythm. A chaotic, unpredictable rhythm, but somehow functional. Jack was in the kitchen, preparing Sunday lunch, spaghetti with tomato sauce, the only dish he could make without burning, when he heard the doorbell ring. "Ethan, can you get that for me?" he shouted, struggling not to let the pasta stick to the bottom of the pot. Moments later, Ethan appeared in the kitchen, his face tense. "Dad, it's Mrs. Peterson from school. She wants to talk to you." Jack felt a knot in his stomach. Mrs. Peterson was the school principal, and her visits never brought good news. Wiping his hands on the apron, he went to the door. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson," Mrs. Peterson greeted, her tone formal. "Can we talk for a moment?" In the minutes that followed, Jack heard how Olivia was having behavior problems at school, how Sophia was becoming increasingly isolated, and how Noah was having learning difficulties. "Mr. Thompson," Mrs. Peterson concluded, "we understand your family's delicate situation, but it's important that these issues are addressed. Perhaps it would be good to consider some kind of professional help." Jack nodded mechanically, thanked her for the visit, and closed the door. Leaning against it, he let out a deep sigh. How could he handle all of this alone? "Dad." Ethan's voice brought him back to reality. "The pasta is burning." Lunch that day was a mixture of half-burned pasta and canned tomato sauce. As the children ate in silence, Jack couldn't stop thinking about Mrs. Peterson's words. "Kids," he began hesitantly, Are you happy?" 5 pairs of eyes turned to him, expressions ranging from confusion to sadness. "I miss Mommy," Noah said softly, playing with the food on his plate. "I do too, sweetie," Jack replied, feeling his heart tighten. "But we're together, aren't we? And we're going to be okay." That night, after the children had gone to bed, Jack sat on the porch, his head full of worries. That's when he noticed movement in the garden next door. "Mrs. Wilson, are you still awake?" The neighbor smiled, approaching the fence that separated the yards. "Sometimes sleep eludes me, Jack. And you, what are you doing up at this hour?" Before he knew it, Jack was pouring his heart out, telling her about Mrs. Peterson's visit, about the children's difficulties, about his fear of failing as a father. Mrs. Wilson listened patiently, and when Jack finished, she said, "You know, Jack, when my husband passed away, I thought I couldn't go on. But I learned that life continues, and we have to continue with it. But how, Mrs. Wilson? How can I be both father and mother at the same time?" "You can't, dear," she replied gently. "You can only be yourself, and that's more than enough." Mrs. Wilson's words echoed in Jack's mind for days. He began to observe each of his children more closely, trying to understand their individual needs. For Olivia, he created an anger corner in the backyard, where she could punch a sandbag whenever she felt frustrated. For Sophia, he started having special reading moments before bed, just the two of them. Noah got more attention in his studies, with Jack dedicating an hour every night to help him with homework. The changes didn't happen overnight, but gradually, Jack began to see results. Complaints from school decreased, and he noticed more smiles on his children's faces. One day, while pruning the garden, a new skill he was learning from Mrs. Wilson, Jack had an idea. He gathered the children and proposed a family project, transforming the backyard into a beautiful garden. "But Dad, you don't even know how to take care of plants," Ethan argued, skeptical. "Well, then we'll learn together," Jack replied with a smile. "What do you think?" To his surprise, the children embraced the idea with enthusiasm. In the following weekends, the Thompson family could be seen working in the garden, planting flowers, building flower beds, and laughing together. It was during one of these days working in the garden that Jack realized something. They were going to be okay. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but they were moving forward, growing together. Looking at his children, dirty and smiling, Jack felt a wave of pride and love. They had faced abandonment, prejudice, and countless difficulties, but they were there, united and stronger. What Jack didn't know was that this small gardening project would be the beginning of something much bigger, something that, years later, would not only sustain his family but also put them at the center of a storm that no one could have predicted. But for now, on that sunny afternoon, all that mattered was the smile on their faces and the promise of a new beginning blooming in their backyard. Time has a peculiar way of passing. Sometimes it seems to drag like a snail. At other times, it flies like a rocket. For the Thompson family, the years that followed Sarah's abandonment were a mixture of both. 5 years had passed since that fateful rainy night. The garden that had started as a family project had grown into something much bigger. Jack, who once barely knew the difference between a rose and a daisy, was now known throughout the neighborhood as the Flower Man. It was a Saturday morning, and Jack was in the backyard, pruning some rose bushes, when he heard Ethan's voice, now 17 years old. "Dad, I need to talk to you," said the teenager, a serious expression on his face. Jack felt that familiar tightness in his chest. In recent years, he had learned to fear these serious conversations. "Sure, son, what is it?" Ethan hesitated for a moment before dropping the bomb. "I want to look for Mom." The world seemed to stop for an instant. Jack felt as if the air had been ripped from his lungs. "Ethan, I know you don't want to talk about her," Ethan interrupted, "but I need to know, Dad. I need to understand why she left us." Jack looked at his son, seeing not the frightened boy from 5 years ago, but a determined young man. With a deep sigh, he nodded. "All right, let's talk about it. But first, let's call your siblings. They deserve to know too." Gathering the 5 children in the living room brought back memories of that first night without Sarah. But now, instead of scared kids, Jack saw growing young people, each dealing with abandonment in their own way. Olivia, at 14, had channeled her anger into sports, becoming a promising volleyball player. Sophia, her twin, had found refuge in books and music. Noah, at 11, had overcome his learning difficulties and was now one of the best students in his class. And Emily, the youngest at 8, had grown up never knowing her mother, but with the unconditional love of her father and siblings. "Kids," Jack began, his voice trembling slightly, "your brother Ethan wants to look for your mother, and before we make any decisions, I think you deserve to know the whole truth." In the hours that followed, Jack told everything he knew about Sarah's departure. He talked about the postpartum depression she faced after Emily's birth, about how she felt overwhelmed and unable to cope with motherhood. "But why did she never come back?" Sophia asked, tears in her eyes. "I don't know, sweetheart," Jack answered honestly. "Maybe she was afraid or ashamed. Maybe she thought we'd be better off without her." "We are better off without her," Olivia muttered, anger evident in her voice. Jack looked at each of his children, feeling a mixture of pride and pain. "I know it's been hard, but look at you. Look at what we've achieved together. We're a family, with or without her." The silence that followed was broken by Emily. "Dad, do you think she still loves us?" The innocent question hit Jack like a punch to the gut. He pulled his youngest daughter into a tight hug. "I'm sure she does, my love. Sometimes, the people we love make choices we don't understand." The conversation continued late into the night, with each child expressing their feelings and doubts. When they finally decided to go to sleep, Jack felt emotionally exhausted, but also relieved. It was as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The next morning, Jack woke up to the sound of laughter coming from the backyard. Looking out the window, he saw his children working together in the garden. Ethan was teaching Noah how to prune, while the twins were planting new seedlings. Emily was running between them, watering the plants, and occasionally her siblings, with a small watering can. At that moment, Jack realized that, despite the pain of abandonment, they had grown not only as individuals but as a family. The garden they had started together years ago was a living testament to that. Going down the stairs to join his children, Jack was surprised by an excited Olivia. "Dad, I had an amazing idea," she exclaimed. "What if we turned our garden into a business? We could sell flowers and plants to the neighborhood." Jack looked at the hopeful faces of his children and felt a wave of pride and love. "You know what? I think that's a brilliant idea." Little did he know that this simple idea would be the beginning of a new phase in their lives. A phase that would bring not only success, but also challenges that would test the family bonds they had forged over the years. And somewhere, not too far away, Sarah was beginning to feel the weight of her choices, unaware that soon their paths would cross again, in a way that none of them could have predicted. The scent of freshly cut roses filled the air of the small Thompson family garden shop, which had become the family's pride over the past 7 years. Jack, now 45, was arranging a bouquet while watching Ethan, 22, attend to a customer. The family business had grown beyond expectations. What had started as a backyard project was now a respected flower shop in town, with plans to expand to a larger greenhouse. "Dad," Ethan called, approaching the counter after the customer left. "I need to tell you something." Jack recognized that tone. It was the same one Ethan had used 7 years ago when he expressed the desire to look for Sarah. "Say, what is it, son?" Ethan hesitated, running his hand through his hair in a nervous gesture. I found Mom." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Jack felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. "What do you mean? You found her?" "I've been looking for her for months," Ethan confessed. "I hired a private investigator. He located her in a town 120 miles from here." Jack leaned on the counter, feeling dizzy. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "I didn't want to hurt you, Dad. And I didn't know if I really wanted to find her. But now..." "Now what, Ethan?" "She wants to see us, all of us." The shop's bell rang, interrupting the conversation. Olivia entered, carrying boxes of new seedlings. At 19, she was the image of determination, dividing her time between business school and work at the flower shop. "What's going on?" she asked, noticing the tension in the air. Jack and Ethan exchanged looks. "I think we'd better call everyone for a family meeting," Jack said finally. That night, the Thompson living room was filled with conflicting emotions. Sophia, also 19, sat quietly, her eyes revealing a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Noah, 16, couldn't stay still, pacing back and forth. Emily, now 13, watched everything with wide eyes, trying to understand what was happening. Ethan told everyone about his secret search and what he had discovered. The reactions were varied. Olivia exploded in anger. Sophia cried silently. Noah was in shock, and Emily, who barely remembered her mother, seemed more confused than anything else. "How could she?" Olivia shouted. "After all these years, she thinks she can just come back." "Maybe she has an explanation," Sophia whispered, always the voice of reason. "Explanation," Noah scoffed. "What explanation could justify abandoning 5 children?" Jack watched the heated discussion, his heart breaking at the pain in his children's eyes. Finally, he raised his hand, asking for silence. "Kids," he began, his voice shaky, "I know this is hard for all of us, but I think we need to hear what she has to say." "Do you want to see her?" Emily asked, her voice small and uncertain. Jack hesitated. Did he want to see Sarah again? The woman who had abandoned him, who had left their children. Part of him wanted to scream that no, that they were better off without her. But another part, "Yes," he answered finally, "I think we all need this, for closure, if nothing else." The decision wasn't unanimous. Olivia vehemently refused to participate, while the others reluctantly agreed. It was decided that Jack, Ethan, and Sophia would go first for an initial meeting. The following week, Jack found himself driving to the neighboring town, his stomach a knot of anxiety. Beside him, Ethan kept his eyes fixed on the road, while Sophia nervously fiddled with her phone in the back seat. When they arrived at the agreed cafe, Jack felt like he was living a strange dream. And then he saw her. Sarah was sitting at a table in the corner, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked older, of course, but was still recognizable. When their gazes met, it was as if time had stopped. "Jack," she whispered, standing up. "Ethan, Sophia's, I don't even know where to start." "How about from the beginning?" Jack suggested, his voice firmer than he felt. In the minutes that followed, Sarah told a story of deep depression, paralyzing fear, and decisions she bitterly regretted. She talked about how she fled to a distant aunt's house, how she spent years in therapy, trying to gather the courage to come back. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she concluded, tears streaming down her face, "but I need you to know how sorry I am, how much I love each one of you." Jack looked at his children, seeing a mixture of emotions on their faces. He knew this conversation was just the beginning. There was much to be said, much to be processed. What none of them knew was that this meeting would be the catalyst for a series of events that would test family bonds like never before. Even deeper secrets would come to light, and the Thompson family would be forced to face painful truths about their past and their future. Meanwhile, back at the flower shop, Olivia was receiving an unexpected visit that would change everything. The shop's bell chimed, announcing the arrival of a customer. Olivia, busy arranging a lily bouquet, looked up distractedly. Welcome to Thompson Family Garden. How can I help? The words died in her throat. There, standing at the entrance of the shop, was a woman she would recognize anywhere, despite the years that had passed. Mom? Sarah took a hesitant step into the shop, her eyes scanning the environment before settling on Olivia. Hello, my daughter, she said softly. Olivia's initial shock quickly turned to anger. What are you doing here? Dad and the others went to meet you. I know, Sarah replied, her voice trembling. But I needed to see you too. You didn't want to go with them, so you thought it would be a good idea to show up by surprise, Olivia interrupted, her voice filled with bitterness. 12 years, Mom, 12 years without a word, without a phone call, nothing. And now you just show up as if nothing happened. Tears began to form in Sarah's eyes. Olivia, I know I made terrible mistakes. Mistakes? Olivia laughed humorlessly. Abandoning your children isn't a mistake. It's a choice you made every day for the past 12 years. The shop's bell rang again and Noah entered, freezing at the scene before him. Mom, what's going on? The tension in the shop was palpable. Olivia, trembling with anger, Noah, confused and shocked, and Sarah, looking small and fragile between her now grown children. I came to try to explain, Sarah began, looking from one child to the other. To ask for forgiveness, if you can find it in your heart. Forgiveness, Olivia exploded. Do you have any idea what we went through? What Dad went through trying to raise 5 kids alone? The birthdays, graduations, and important moments you missed. Noah, always the calmer one, put a hand on his sister's shoulder. Olivia, maybe we should hear what she has to say. There's nothing to be said, Olivia retorted, pulling away. She made her choice a long time ago. At that moment, the door opened again and Jack entered with Ethan, Sophia, and Emily. The shock on their faces upon seeing Sarah there was evident. Sarah? Jack asked, his voice a mixture of surprise and concern. What are you doing here? I couldn't wait, Sarah responded, her eyes scanning each familiar yet strange face. I needed to see all of you. Emily, who had no real memories of her mother, stepped forward, curiosity in her eyes. Are you really my mom? Sarah's heart seemed to be breaking. Yes, sweetheart, it's me. The tension in the air was so thick it seemed difficult to breathe. Jack Wee, realizing the situation could escalate quickly, made a decision. I think we'd better go home, he said calmly. This isn't the place to have this conversation. The journey back to the Thompson house was made in heavy silence. Sarah followed Jack's car in her own vehicle, her heart pounding with each mile traveled. Once at home, everyone gathered in the living room, the air heavy with conflicting emotions. Jack, feeling the weight of responsibility, took the floor. I know this is difficult for all of us, he began, looking at each of his children, but I think we need to give your mother a chance to explain. Sarah, sitting alone in an armchair, looked small and vulnerable. She took a deep breath before starting to speak. First, I want you to know that there's no excuse for what I did, she said, her voice shaking. Abandoning you was the biggest mistake of my life, and I've lived with that regret every day. She then began to tell about the severe postpartum depression she faced after Emily's birth, how she felt incapable, inadequate as a mother and wife, the constant fear that she was harming her children just by existing. I thought you'd be better off without me, she continued, tears running down her face. That Jack could take care of you better than I ever could. I was wrong, so terribly wrong. Olivia, who until then had maintained a stone-faced expression, spoke, and the last 12 years. Why did you never come back, never call? Sarah lowered her eyes, ashamed. The shame, the fear, the more time passed, the harder it seemed to come back. I sought help, did therapy for years, trying to gather courage to face what I had done. The room fell silent for several minutes, each family member processing what they had heard. It was Sophia who finally broke the silence. I understand that you were sick, she said softly. But it still hurts to know that you chose to leave us. Ethan nodded, adding, it's hard to reconcile the mom we remember with the person who abandoned us. Noah, who had been quiet until then, spoke. I don't even know if I have real memories of you, or if they're just stories I've been told. And Emily, the youngest, looked at Sarah with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. See, I grew up without a mother. How can that change now? Jack watched everything, his heart breaking at the pain on each face, including Sarah's. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. "We can't erase the past," he said finally, "but we can decide how we want to move forward from here. Sarah, you need to understand that you can't just come back and expect everything to be as it was before. There's a lot to be rebuilt, if that's even possible." Sarah nodded, wiping away tears. "I know, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes, if you'll give me the chance." Olivia, who had remained silent for a while, finally spoke. "I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I want you in my life." The words hung in the air, heavy and painful. Sarah accepted them with a sad nod, understanding the long road ahead. Jack looked at his children, seeing a mixture of emotions on their faces: anger, confusion, sadness, and perhaps, in some, a small spark of hope. "We don't need to decide everything today," he said gently. "This will take time. Let's take it one step at a time." As the Thompson family prepared to navigate these uncharted waters, no one could predict the challenges that were still to come. Sarah's return was just the beginning of a journey that would test family ties like never before. And somewhere, not too far away, forces were already in motion that would bring to light long-buried secrets, threatening everything Jack had built over the past 12 years. A week had passed since Sarah's unexpected return, and the tension in the Thompson house was palpable. Jack had suggested that Sarah stay at a nearby hotel, a decision that brought both relief and frustration in equal parts to the family members. It was a Friday night, and Jack had called for a family meeting. The air in the living room was charged with expectation and apprehension when Sarah arrived, looking nervous and out of place. "I thank you for having me," she said softly, sitting in the most distant armchair. Jack looked at each of his children before speaking. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation. We all have questions, fears, and things to say. This is the moment." Olivia, who had barely spoken to her mother all week, was the first to break the silence. "Why now?" she asked, her voice trembling with pent-up emotion. "Why come back after so long?" Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes watery. "The truth is, I never stopped thinking about you. Every day was a struggle between the desire to come back and the paralyzing fear of facing what I had done." "But you managed to leave," Ethan intervened, his voice a mixture of hurt and curiosity. "How could you leave 5 children behind?" Sarah lowered her eyes, shame evident on her face. "I was sick, more than I realized at the time. The postpartum depression after Emily's birth was just the last straw. In fact, I had been fighting depression for years. This revelation caught everyone by surprise, especially Jack. Years? Why did you never tell me?" "I was ashamed," Sarah admitted. "I thought it was weakness, that I should be able to handle everything on my own. And the more I tried to be the perfect mother and wife, the more I felt like a fraud." Sophia, always the most empathetic, asked softly, "And what happened after you left?" Sarah then told about the initial months living with a distant aunt, the nervous breakdown she suffered, the hospitalization in a psychiatric clinic, and the years of therapy that followed. "I wanted to come back so many times," she said, tears now flowing freely down her face. "But the more time passed, the more impossible it seemed. How could I ask for forgiveness after so long?" Noah, who had been quiet until then, spoke. "And why did you decide to come back now?" Sarah hesitated, and everyone noticed there was more to the story. "I received a diagnosis a few months ago, breast cancer." A shocked silence fell over the room. Jack felt his heart tighten, a confused mixture of emotions washing over him. "It's not terminal," Sarah hurried to add, "but it made me realize that I couldn't put it off any longer, that I needed to try to fix what I had broken before it was too late." Emily, who had been silent until then, asked with a choked voice, "Are you going to die?" Sarah stood up and approached her youngest daughter, stopping at a respectful distance. "No, sweetie. The doctors are optimistic. But the possibility made me see how much I had lost, how much I still wanted to know you." Olivia, fighting back her own tears, confronted her mother. "And you think that justifies everything? That we can just forget the last 12 years?" "No," Sarah responded firmly. "It doesn't justify anything. I'm here to ask for forgiveness. but I understand if you can't give me that. I just want the chance to try to fix what I broke, if you'll allow me." Jack, feeling the weight of all the emotions in the room, decided to intervene. "I think we all need time to process this. Sarah, you said there's more to the story. Is there anything else we need to know?" Sarah seemed to be fighting an internal battle. Finally, she spoke. "Yes, there's something else. Something I should have told a long time ago." She looked directly at Jack. "Do you remember my brother, George?" Jack nodded, confused. "So, of course, but what does he have to do with this?" "George isn't my brother," Sarah revealed, her voice almost a whisper. "He's my half-brother, the result of an affair my father had." The revelation hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Jack felt as if the ground was opening beneath his feet. "Tice, what are you saying, Sarah? I found this out shortly before I left," she continued, the words now coming out hastily. "My mother told me on her deathbed. The shock of this revelation added to the depression I was already facing. It was too much. I collapsed." The room fell silent for several minutes, everyone trying to process this new information. It was Ethan who finally spoke. "So all this time, there was more behind your departure than just postpartum depression?" Sarah nodded sadly. "Yes, I felt betrayed, as if my whole life had been a lie. And instead of seeking help, talking to Jack, I ran away." "Say it was cowardly and selfish, I know that now." Jack, still stunned, asked, "Why didn't you tell me this before, this week, or even today?" "I was afraid," Sarah admitted. "Afraid that if you knew the whole truth, you'd never forgive me. But I realized I can't ask for a second chance based on more secrets and lies." The silence that followed was heavy, each family member lost in their own thoughts and emotions. Jack looked at his children, seeing a mixture of shock, confusion, and, in some cases, a glimmer of understanding. "This doesn't change what you did," Olivia finally said, her voice softer than before, "but it helps to understand a little better." Sophia, always the peacemaker, suggested, "Maybe we can try taking small steps. We can't erase the past, but we can try to build something new." Noah and Emily exchanged glances before Noah spoke. "I think I'd like to get to know you, Mom. The person you are now." Sarah couldn't contain her tears at these words. "I'd like that very much. You've all grown so much, become incredible people. I know I've missed a lot, but if you'll give me the chance, I'd like to be part of your lives now." Jack, who had been silent, processing everything, finally spoke. "This is going to take time, Sarah. There's a lot of pain, a lot of open wounds. But if you're really committed, if you're willing to be patient and work hard, maybe we can find a way forward together." The Thompson family now found themselves at a turning point. Sarah's return and her revelations had shaken the foundations that Jack had so carefully built over the past 12 years. But it also opened the possibility of healing, of a new beginning. What none of them knew was that this night of confrontations and confessions was just the beginning. In the days and weeks that would follow, they would face even greater challenges that would test family ties in ways no one could have predicted. And somewhere, not too far away, a figure from the past was preparing to enter the scene, bringing with them secrets that would threaten everything the Thompson family had built. 2 weeks had passed since the night of revelations, and the Thompson family was trying to find a new balance. Jack had decided to organize a Sunday lunch, a tradition they had maintained for years, but this time with a special guest, Sarah. The morning began with Jack in the kitchen, preparing the lasagna that had become the family's favorite dish. The aroma of tomato sauce and melted cheese filled the house, bringing memories of simpler times. Ethan was the first to come downstairs, offering to help his father. As they chopped vegetables for the salad, Ethan broke the silence. "Dad, do you think it was the right decision, inviting Mom today?" Jack paused, considering the question. "Honestly, son, I don't know, but I think we need to try, for you, for your siblings." Gradually, the others arrived. Olivia entered the kitchen with a serious expression, clearly still struggling with her feelings towards her mother. Sophia, always the peacemaker, began setting the table, humming softly. Noah and Emily appeared together, whispering between themselves, a mix of anxiety and expectation on their young faces. At 1 p.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. A tense silence fell over the house. Jack took a deep breath and went to answer. Sarah was standing at the door, holding a homemade apple pie. Her eyes were watery, and she looked nervous. "Hi," she said softly. "I brought dessert. Is it still your favorite?" Jack nodded, allowing a small smile. "Yes, it still is." "Come in, everyone's in the dining room." The meal began in an uncomfortable silence. The only sound was the clinking of cutlery on plates. It was Emily who finally broke the ice. "Mom, have you always made apple pie this well?" Sarah smiled, grateful for the opening. "Actually, no. I learned in recent years. When I was away, I used to make this pie on your birthdays. It was my way of feeling connected." The admission touched everyone in different ways. Olivia, who had maintained a closed expression, seemed to soften a bit. Sophia discreetly wiped away a tear. "You missed a lot," Noah said, his voice a mixture of sadness and accusation. Sarah nodded, accepting the weight of those words. "Yes, I did, and there's not a day that I don't regret it. But I'm here now, if you'll allow me, to try to get to know you, to hear about all those things I missed." Jack, feeling the need to ease the tension, began telling stories from the past years. He talked about Emily's first tooth, about how Ethan broke his arm trying to imitate a superhero, about Olivia's volleyball competitions. Gradually, the others began to join in, sharing their own memories. Laughter began to mix with tears, creating a bittersweet atmosphere of nostalgia and reconciliation. Sarah listened to everything attentively, her heart breaking a little more with each story, but also filling with pride for what her children had become. When it was time for dessert, the atmosphere had changed considerably. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but there was a sense of progress, of bridges slowly being rebuilt. As they savored the pie, Jack decided it was time to discuss the future. "Sarah," he began, "we know about your diagnosis. How can we help?" The question caught Sarah by surprise. She didn't expect them to care so much, so quickly. I have surgery scheduled for next month. After that, I'll start chemotherapy. You don't have to go through this alone," Sophia said softly. "We can take turns accompanying you, if you want." Olivia, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "I can help with the appointments. My college schedule is more flexible." Sarah couldn't hold back her tears. "You have no idea how much this means to me. I know I don't deserve—" "It's not about deserving," Jack gently interrupted. "It's about family. And despite everything, you're still part of this family." The moment was interrupted by the sound of a notification on Jack's phone. He frowned as he read the message. "What is it, Dad?" Ethan asked, noticing the change in his expression. Jack hesitated before answering. "It's from the bank. Apparently, there's been a strange movement in the flower shop's account. They're asking me to come to the branch first thing tomorrow morning." A worried silence fell over the table. The flower shop was the family's livelihood, the business that Jack had built from scratch after Sarah's abandonment. "It must be some mistake," Sophia tried to reassure. "I'm sure they'll sort it out quickly." But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, very wrong. What he didn't know was that this notification was just the tip of the iceberg. A series of events was about to unfold, events that would test the newly rebuilt bonds of the Thompson family in ways no one could have predicted. And somewhere, not too far away, a shadowy figure from the past was watching, waiting for the right moment to make their move. Monday morning dawned grey and cold, reflecting Jack's tense mood as he headed to the bank. The meeting with the manager was brief and alarming. A significant amount had been transferred from the flower shop's account to an unknown account abroad. With a heavy heart and a whirling mind, Jack returned to the shop. As he entered, he was greeted by the concerned looks of Ethan and Olivia, who were minding the business. "So, Dad?" Ethan asked anxiously. Jack took a deep breath before answering. "It's not good news. Someone gained access to our account and transferred a large sum of money." Olivia paled. "How much?" "Almost all of our working capital and savings for expansion," Jack admitted, his voice trembling. The silence that followed was deafening. Years of hard work, the dream of expanding the business, everything seemed to be crumbling. "What are we going to do now?" Ethan asked, worry evident in his voice. Before Jack could answer, the shop's bell chimed. They all turned, expecting to see a customer, but instead, they were faced with a familiar face that none of them had seen in years. "George," Jack exclaimed, surprised. There, standing at the entrance of the shop, was George, Sarah's half-brother. He looked older, of course, but still maintained that air of confidence that Jack had always associated with him. "Hello, Jack," George said, his tone surprisingly calm. "I see I've arrived with perfect timing." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you doing here, George?" George smiled, but there was no warmth in his eyes. "I've come to make a business proposal, actually. But first, how about we sit down? We have a lot to talk about." Reluctantly, Jack agreed. They headed to the small office at the back of the shop, with Ethan and Olivia following closely, suspicious. Once seated, George got straight to the point. "I know about the money, Jack. In fact, I'm responsible for it." The revelation fell like a bomb. Jack felt his blood boil. "You? How? Why?" George leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Jack. "Remember when we worked together years ago, before you married my sister?" Jack nodded slowly, memories of a distant past resurfacing. "Well, it seems you've forgotten some important things from that time," George continued. "Things that could be quite damaging if they came to light now." Olivia, unable to take it anymore, intervened. "What are you talking about? What things?" George smiled at his niece. "Just, dear Olivia, your father never told you about his days of, let's say, creative accounting." Jack paled. "George, that was decades ago. I was young. I made mistakes." "Mistakes that could cost you everything now," George interrupted. "Just imagine, the respected Jack Thompson, owner of the beloved local flower shop, exposed as a fraudster." Ethan stepped forward, protecting his father. "Is that why you stole our money? Blackmail?" George laughed. "Steal is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as insurance. The money is safe for now. But what happens to it depends entirely on your father." Jack felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. Everything he had worked for over the last 12 years, the reputation he had built, the future he planned for his children, everything was at risk. "What do you want, George?" he asked, defeated. "It's simple," George replied, leaning back in his chair. "I want half of your company, not just the money, but active participation in the business." The proposal was met with shock and outrage. Olivia was the first to react. "Are you crazy? After what you did, you think we're just going to give you half of our business?" George remained impassive. "The alternative is to see your father exposed and possibly arrested. The choice is yours." The silence that followed was tense. Jack looked at his children, seeing the confusion and fear in their eyes. He knew he needed to tell the truth. "Kids," he began, his voice shaking, "there's something you need to know. Before I met your mother, before I built all this, I made mistakes. Serious mistakes." In the minutes that followed, Jack told about his past, about how, in financial desperation, he had become involved in illegal accounting schemes. He explained how George, who worked at the same company at the time, had helped him cover it all up. "I thought I had left all of that behind," Jack concluded, tears in his eyes. "I've spent the last 20 years trying to be a better man, a better father." Ethan and Olivia listened in shock, trying to reconcile this new information with the image they had of their father. George, taking advantage of the moment of vulnerability, pressed. "So what will it be, Jack? Partnership or exposure?" Before Jack could answer, the office door opened abruptly. Sarah entered, her eyes flashing with anger. "Enough, George," she said firmly. "This ends now." Sarah's sudden presence caught everyone by surprise, especially George. "Sarah, what are you doing here? Stopping you from destroying this family?" she replied, advancing into the room. "I know everything, George, about what happened in the past, about your obsession with getting revenge on Jack, and I won't allow you to continue." George stood up, his confidence visibly shaken. "You don't understand, Sarah. No," Sarah interrupted him. "You don't understand. Jack may have made mistakes in the past, but he spent the last 2 decades building something honest, something good. He raised 5 incredible children alone, while her voice faltered for a moment, "while I ran away from my responsibilities." She turned to Jack and the children. "I'm sorry for all of this. George approached me weeks ago, telling me about his plan. I should have said something before, but I was afraid afraid of losing the chance to reconnect with you. Jack looked at Sarah, a mixture of gratitude and confusion in his eyes. Why are you doing this, Sarah? Because it's the right thing to do, she answered simply. And because, despite everything, you're still my family. Turning back to George, Sarah continued, It's over, George. Either you return the money and disappear, or I'll go to the police and tell them everything I know about your own illegal schemes. The choice is yours. The confrontation that followed was tense, with George alternating between threats and pleas. But in the end, faced with the united front presented by the Thompson family, he gave in. Hours later, with George gone and the money in the process of being recovered, the family gathered in the living room of the house. The air was heavy with emotions, relief, confusion, betrayal, and, surprisingly, a renewed sense of unity. Jack looked at his children and Sarah, feeling the weight of the secrets that had been revealed. I'm sorry, he began, for hiding the truth, for putting everything at risk. Ethan interrupted him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Dad, we all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after them. Olivia, still processing everything, added, It's going to take time to assimilate all of this, but we're in this together. Sarah, sitting a little apart, spoke softly. I have a lot to apologize for too, but if you'll give me the chance, I'd like to help fix what was broken. Not just between us, but in the business too. Jack looked at her, seeing sincerity in her eyes. I think we all deserve a second chance, he said finally. As the Thompson family prepared to face the challenges that would come, rebuilding trust, dealing with the consequences of the past, and perhaps forging a new future together, one thing became clear. Family bonds, though tested, proved to be stronger than any secret or betrayal. What they didn't know was that this ordeal was just the beginning. The real test of their strength as a family was yet to come. The sun had barely risen when the phone rang, yanking Jack out of a restless sleep. His heart raced when he saw the hospital number on the caller ID. Hello? He answered, his voice shaky. Mr. Thompson, this is St. Mary's Hospital. There's been an accident. The next words seemed to arrive in slow motion. Car, crash, critical condition, Noah. Jack felt the world spin. Noah, his 16-year-old son, was on his way to a chess tournament in a neighboring town. How could this have happened? Within minutes, the Thompson house transformed into a whirlwind of activity. Ethan grabbed the car keys. Olivia and Sophia rushed to wake Emily while Jack, still in shock, tried to contact Sarah. The journey to the hospital was a blur of sirens and red lights. Jack barely remembered driving, his mind filled with terrible images of his injured son. In the waiting room, the family gathered, fear palpable in the air. Emily, still in her pajamas, clung to Sophia, while Olivia paced back and forth, unable to stay still. Sarah arrived minutes later, breathless and wide-eyed with concern. What happened? How is he? Before Jack could answer, a doctor appeared, his expression grave. Family of Noah Thompson. Everyone stood up at once, anxious for news. Noah suffered multiple fractures and a head injury, the doctor explained. He's in surgery now. The next few hours will be critical. The words fell like a weight on the family. Jack felt his legs weaken, and it was Ethan who supported him, guiding him to a chair. He's going to be okay, isn't he? Emily asked, her voice small and scared. The doctor tried a reassuring smile. We're doing everything we can. Noah is young and strong, that's in his favor. The hours that followed were torture. The family took turns between the cafeteria and the hospital chapel, praying, waiting, fearing. Sarah, who in recent days had kept herself on the sidelines, trying to regain her place in the family, suddenly found herself at the center of everything. She ran back and forth, seeking updates, comforting the children, being the pillar that Jack, in his state of shock, couldn't be at that moment. It was during one of these runs that Sarah bumped into someone in the hallway. I'm sorry, she began, then froze as she recognized the face. George. Her half-brother looked equally surprised to see her. Sarah, what are you doing here? Before she could answer, Jack appeared, his eyes narrowing when he saw George. What is he doing here? He asked, his voice laden with distrust. George raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. I swear I didn't know you'd be here. I came to visit a friend. But Jack wasn't convinced. That's quite a coincidence, don't you think? After everything that happened, the tension in the air was palpable. Sarah, sensing that the situation could escalate quickly, intervened. This isn't the time or place. Our son is in surgery, Jack. We need to focus on him now. Sarah's words seemed to bring Jack back to reality. He nodded, casting one last distrustful look at George before turning and heading back to the waiting room. Sarah hesitated for a moment before following Jack. "George," she said, her voice firm, "whatever you're planning, please, not now. This family has been through enough." George watched her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "I understand. I didn't come to cause trouble, Sarah. Believe it or not, I care about you." With those enigmatic words, he turned and disappeared down the corridor, leaving Sarah with an unsettling feeling. Back in the waiting room, the atmosphere was one of pure anguish. Emily had finally fallen asleep on Sophia's lap, while Olivia continued her incessant pacing. Ethan was sitting next to Jack, both lost in thought. It was Sarah who broke the silence. "Do you remember the first time Noah won a chess tournament?" Everyone looked at her, surprised by the sudden question. "He was only 8 years old," Sarah continued, a small smile on her lips. "He was so nervous he almost gave up before the final." Jack, coming out of his stupor, added, "But he didn't give up. He faced his fear and won." "He's always been the most determined of all of us," Ethan said, his voice choked. One by one, they began to share memories of Noah. His passion for impossible puzzles, his crooked smile when he was up to something, the way he always knew exactly what to say to cheer someone up. Amidst the tears and soft laughter, something changed in the room. The tension that had been between Sarah and the rest of the family seemed to diminish, replaced by a sense of unity in the face of adversity. Hours passed, and finally the doctor returned. Everyone stood up, holding their breath. "The surgery was successful," he announced, and a collective sigh of relief filled the room. "Noah is stable, but he's not out of danger yet. The next 48 hours will be crucial." In the days that followed, the family took turns at the hospital, never leaving Noah alone. Jack and Sarah, who for weeks could barely stay in the same environment without tension, now worked in harmony, caring not only for Noah but also for the other children. It was during one of these nights of vigil that Jack finally let his guard down. Sitting next to Noah's bed, with Sarah asleep in the chair beside him, he held his son's hand and cried silently. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for all the secrets, for not being the father you deserved." To his surprise, he felt a slight squeeze on his hand. Looking up, he saw Noah's eyes slowly opening. "Dad?" Noah murmured, his voice hoarse. Jack felt his heart leap. "I'm here, son. We're all here." Sarah woke up with the movement, and her eyes filled with tears when she saw Noah conscious. "Oh, my love," she whispered, approaching the bed. In the minutes that followed, as doctors were called and the rest of the family informed, Jack and Sarah remained by Noah's side, their hands intertwined without them realizing it. As he watched his children gather around Noah, hugging and crying with relief, Jack felt something change within him. The secrets, the hurt, the mistakes of the past, everything seemed small compared to the love he felt for his family at that moment. Noah's accident, though terrible, had served as a catalyst. It forced the Thompson family to face not only the possibility of loss, but also the value of forgiveness and unity. As Noah began his long journey of recovery, the family found itself more united than ever. Sarah, who had previously struggled to find her place, was now an integral part of caring not only for Noah, but for all the children. What they didn't know was that this ordeal was just the beginning. New challenges were on the horizon, challenges that would test this newly discovered family unity in ways no one could have predicted. And somewhere, not too far away, George was watching, his own plans and secrets yet to be revealed. 3 weeks had passed since Noah's accident. The Thompson family's routine had completely transformed, now revolving around hospital visits and the young man's recovery. The flower shop, once the center of their lives, was now managed from a distance, with Ethan taking on more responsibilities. On a particularly exhausting afternoon, Jack was sitting in the hospital room watching Noah sleep. His youngest son still had a long way to go, but the doctors were optimistic about his recovery. Sarah entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Jack and sat down beside him. "How is he?" she asked softly. "Better," Jack replied, his voice tired. "The physiotherapist said he's progressing faster than expected." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound being the constant beep of the monitors. It was Sarah who finally broke the silence. "Jack, we need to talk about what happened with George on the day of the accident." Jack visibly tensed. The encounter with George at the hospital had been momentarily forgotten amid the chaos and concern for Noah, but now the suspicions came back in full force. "Do you think he had something to do with the accident?" Jack asked, his voice a mix of anger and fear. Sarah hesitated. "I don't know. But the coincidence is too strange to ignore." Before they could continue the conversation, Olivia entered the room, her face a mask of concern. "Dad, Mom," she said, still hesitant to address Sarah as Mom, "we have a problem at the flower shop." Jack stood up immediately. "What happened?" "You'd better come see for yourselves," Olivia replied, her voice tense. Leaving Noah in the care of a nurse, the 3 quickly headed to the flower shop. When they arrived, they found Ethan and Sophia in front of the store, looking horrified at the facade. The window was broken, and red spray paint covered the walls with the phrase, "Fraudsters not welcome." Jack felt his blood run cold. His past, the mistakes he had made so long ago, were now exposed for the whole town to see. "Who would do this?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling. Jack and Sarah exchanged glances. They both had the same suspicion, but it was Ethan who verbalized it. "It was George, wasn't it? He's trying to destroy us." Jack nodded slowly. "It seems so. But why? Why now?" Sarah stepped forward, her expression determined. "I think it's time we confront George once and for all. But first, we need to be honest with the children, Jack. They deserve to know the whole truth." Jack looked at his children, seeing confusion and fear in their eyes. He knew Sarah was right. There was no more hiding the truth. "Let's go inside," he said. "We have a lot to talk about." In the minutes that followed, sitting among flowers and broken glass, Jack told everything. He spoke about his youth, about the financial difficulties that led him to commit accounting fraud, about how George helped him cover it all up. "I thought I had left all of this behind," Jack concluded, his voice heavy with regret. "I've spent the last 20 years trying to be a better man, to build something honest." The children listened in silence, their expressions varying between shock, disappointment, and, surprisingly, understanding. It was Olivia who spoke first. "Why is George doing this now, after so long?" Sarah sighed deeply. "So I think it's time I tell my part of the story." She then revealed how George had approached her weeks before, telling her about his plan for revenge against Jack, how he felt betrayed by Jack having escaped the consequences of his actions, while he, George Diaz, had paid the price for his own mistakes. "I should have told you before," Sarah admitted, tears in her eyes. "But I was afraid of losing the chance to reconnect with you, afraid of destroying everything Jack had built." The silence that followed was heavy. Each family member processed the revelations in their own way. Ethan looked thoughtful, Olivia angry, Sophia hurt, and Emily, who had joined them from school, simply looked confused. "What do we do now?" Ethan finally asked. Jack looked at each of his children, then at Sarah. "I think there's only one thing to do. We face this together, as a family." Sarah nodded, placing a comforting hand on Jack's shoulder. "I agree. No more secrets, no more running from the past. It's time we face this head-on." In the days that followed, the Thompson family worked together to clean the shop's facade and repair the damage. Surprisingly, many customers and neighbors showed up to help, showing that the reputation Jack had built over the years was stronger than the accusations painted on the wall. Meanwhile, Jack and Sarah, with the support of their children, decided to confront George. They invited him to a meeting at the flower shop, determined to put an end to this situation once and for all. The night of the meeting arrived, and the tension was palpable. George entered the shop, his face a mask of arrogance, but his eyes betrayed a hint of surprise at seeing the whole family united. "Well, well," he said, looking around, The happy family reunited. How touching. Jack stepped forward. Enough, George. We know it was you who vandalized the shop. Why? What do you want? George laughed humorlessly. What do I want? Justice, Jack. You escaped the consequences of your actions, built this business, this perfect family, while you what? Sarah interrupted. Chose to cling to the past and resentment. You don't understand, George retorted. I lost everything because of the schemes we were involved in. My reputation, my career, and destroying our family will fix that, Ethan asked, his voice surprisingly calm. George seemed to falter for the first time. He looked at the determined faces in front of him, the evident unity between them. It was Emily, the youngest, who delivered the final blow. Approaching George, she said, Uncle George, Dad told us about the mistakes he made. He apologized and is trying to make things right. Can't you do the same? The simple but profound words of the young girl seemed to hit George like a punch. He looked at Emily, then at the rest of the family, and something in his expression changed. I don't know if I can, he admitted, his voice breaking. Jack stepped forward, extending his hand. Maybe it's time for all of us to leave the past behind, George, to try to fix what was broken, together. The moment that followed was tense, with everyone holding their breath. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, George accepted Jack's outstretched hand. I don't know if I can forgive completely, he said, but maybe we can try. As the Thompson family began the difficult process of reconciliation, not only with George, but also with their own past, a sense of hope filled the air. They had faced abandonment, secrets, threats, and now they were stronger than ever. What they didn't know was that the real test of their strength as a family was yet to come. For while they were resolving one crisis, another was forming on the horizon, one that would test not only their family ties, but also their very identity. The autumn sun cast a golden light over the Thompson garden, where a large table had been set for Sunday lunch. 12 years had passed since the turbulent period that almost destroyed the family, and much had changed. Jack, now with grey hair at his temples, proudly observed the scene before him. His children, all adults, chatted animatedly while helping to prepare the meal. Ethan, at 34, had become a successful businessman, expanding the family's flower shop into a chain of stores across the region. Beside him, his wife Anna cradled their newborn son, Jack's first grandchild. The twins, Olivia and Sophia, now 31, had followed different but equally successful paths. Olivia was a respected lawyer, using her personal experience to help families in difficult situations. Sophia had become a recognized writer, turning her family's story into an inspiring bestseller. Noah, 28, fully recovered from the accident, was now a dedicated physiotherapist, helping others overcome physical traumas just as he had overcome his own. Emily, the youngest at 25, had inherited her father's passion for plants and now managed the original flower shop, transforming it into a community center for therapeutic gardening. Sarah emerged from the house, carrying a steaming dish. The years had been kind to her, and the smile on her face reflected the peace she had finally found. After her successful battle against cancer, she had dedicated herself to counseling, helping other women deal with postpartum depression and motherhood challenges. To everyone's surprise, George was also present at the lunch. The process of forgiveness and reconciliation had been long and difficult, but over time he had become a constant presence in the family's life, finding redemption through volunteer work and support for the Thompsons' community projects. As everyone sat down at the table, Jack looked around, his heart overflowing with gratitude. Before we start, he said, raising his glass, I'd like to make a toast. Everyone turned to him, expectant. 12 years ago, I thought our family was on the brink of destruction. Secrets, resentments, and fears almost separated us forever. He paused, exchanging a meaningful look with Sarah. But we discovered that love and forgiveness are stronger than any obstacle. Today, I toast not only to our family, but to the journey that brought us here. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, added, with each challenge overcome, each wound healed, we became stronger. This family is proof that it's never too late to start over, to fix what was broken. Ethan raised his glass. To the second chance we gave each other. To the courage to face the truth, Olivia completed. To the power of forgiveness, Sophia added softly. Noah smiled. To the strength we found in each other. And to the love that kept us united, Emily concluded. George, visibly moved, raised his glass. To the family that welcomed me, even after everything. The clinking of glasses echoed through the garden, accompanied by smiles and looks full of meaning. As the meal began, filled with lively conversations and laughter, Jack couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey they had taken. From a family shattered by abandonment, haunted by secrets, and almost destroyed by resentment, they had transformed into an example of resilience, forgiveness, and unconditional love. Each challenge faced, each obstacle overcome, had strengthened the bonds that united them. Observing his children, his grandson, his wife, and even George, Jack felt a deep sense of peace. The garden around them, once a symbol of new beginnings, was now a living testimony to their growth and unity. There, in that perfect moment of family harmony, Jack understood that all the trials had been worth it. For in the end, it wasn't the mistakes of the past that defined a family, but how they chose to face the future together. And the future of the Thompsons, he knew, was as bright as the autumn sun that bathed their garden of hope and love.